Now let's see. Let's move on to realism, which is actually perhaps not as interesting as what we've been seeing, but at least we should acknowledge that realism is important.
Well, it is more socially important, and a lot of the works in the authors in the realistic field were trying to bring about change,
Yeah.
and they did. The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. Again, it's a hard read, even in modern times. It is gory, it is disgusting, but it is the truth behind things that were happening in the sausage and meat packing industries. And it changed it forever, so that basically, I mean, people were dying.
Mm-hmm.
And this brought about the change that the regulations, why our meat and everything is safer, and why it's safer for the workers.
Yeah, and well, there's Oliver Twist, and that of course has to do with well, that's Dickens, partly Dickens, social interest in the plight of orphans or young children who were not being covered by taken care of by their parents. And well, of course, we should not overlook Gulliver's Travels, which is not just science fiction, but it is certainly a politically relevant statement.
Yes, it is. And that's, I mean, even in the fiction of this era, people were trying to get their point across, and they did. I mean, this time period changed history. It actually kind of reminds me of the period we're living in right now. I mean, there was a great crossroads, and they decided the direction they wanted to go.
Oh, mm-hmm. Well, let's see. I see we've got Western dime novels, and that reminds me of Don Quixote, because the dime novels were very much like the night stories that Don Quixote was responding to.
Yes. And actually, then that takes us back to Alexander Dumas in Three Musketeers.
Uh-huh.
We counted at least 4 references to Don Quixote in the first chapter.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So I said this still happens. Writers pay homage to what came before them and what inspired them. But yeah, the dime novels are America's version of the Penny Dreadful.
No.
The European version tended to be more dark and gothic. In America, it was the Old West, the Wild West. Supposedly true stories that weren't really true, highly fictionalized.
Mm-hmm. But with people who were supposedly true, or
most of the characters were real people. Like that's where these names came from. Why you have Wild Bill Hickok.
Yeah,
and
Buffalo
Bill Cody,
Doc Holliday, and all those people.
Yep.
Yeah.
And my favorite, Annie Oakley.
Well, yes, right. All of which are still lively stories in the present, although they have also appeared in many, they've been reborn in many current stories or recent stories, and now in movies and musicals, because you mentioned Annie Oakley, musicals. So this is not just historical literature, it is current literature, or current the current culture. It's still a lively part of the current culture. Okay, well, let's see. I see we've got Transcendental.
Yeah, those were the ones that were considered way out there even during the Victorian. Well, actually, this came after Victorian, and these were heavy, deep thinkers. You have Emerson on Golden Pond. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. How about Walden Pond?
No.
But let's see. And of course, Louisa May Alcott.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this was a time period.
Leaves of Grass, Walt Whitman.
Yes.
No. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with Louisa May Alcott, the women in this time period were they were realizing they wanted to be a part of things, but weren't allowed to yet.
And of course, they realized that by writing, they could in fact be, because nobody could stop them.
Exactly.
Writing.
That was their empowerment.
Yeah.
And this led to the reason that women can vote now is because of these women writers in the Victorian and Transcendental eras. One of the really interesting books, Margaret Fuller, Women in the 19th Century, it talks about how they are, but also basically that they shouldn't be that way. Many of the books that you had are guides for women how to behave and, how to sew, how to do what you needed to do. And hers was a little bit more empowering. And it wasn't just stay home.
Wow. And of course, we have a children's era, which would be especially of interest to teachers elementary school teachers.
Yes. Yeah, the children's books are also mostly were Victorian era. And again, these are the same things that kids are reading now, and we're Wizard of Oz, Alice in Wonderland, Peter Pan.
Yeah, I was going to say that those, we don't think of Wizard of Oz as being that old, but it is.
Oh, yeah. And one thing of note, we decided to put Grimm's fairy tales instead of in children's literature. They went in Gothic because the version that we have is the original Grimm's fairy tales, which even though they were designed to be for children, they were very dark.
Very dark, yes. And so they really do fit into, and they are essentially Gothic stories.
Correct.
Oh. Well, let's see. Now, we've looked at the entire, well, we have something upstairs we'll mention. There is an area upstairs that displays the work of our local artists, because we are, in effect, an artist a writer's colony, displays the work of our local writers. And conveniently, we're all over the country, but we are in a writer's colony, conveniently, because we can travel on the internet. And so actually, I guess I would suggest, let us think of ourselves as in a science fiction story, except now it's not now it is actually real.
Exactly.
And
we also have our little friend Odin up there watching over us. He's the mascot of our writers group.
Oh.
I also want to be clear that it's not just one floor up there. There are multiple floors to this library. Lots of stuff to see and do. You could easily come in here and spend a couple hours.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I've always been able to spend a couple of hours, if I had them, in a library.
Yes. And then over here at the beginning is where we're technically ending. Mm-hmm. If for obviously, because of space limitations, we can't have every single book that Gutenberg has.
No.
So what we have done is we have a direct connection to the Gutenberg site, so you can search them directly if you're looking for something that we don't have. But I do invite you to browse the shelves first, because I know you can't judge a book by its cover, but watching it, looking at the covers helps you figure out what you want to read and gives you an idea what they were thinking.
Yeah.